Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the launch of the Snapshot of the Ageing Population in Penrith and the panel discussion that we'll have today. My name's Melissa McSeveny. I'm the Social Planning Coordinator at Penrith City Council. And just some quick housekeeping before we have the official welcome from the Mayor. All of the attendees today are on listen and view mode, but if you'd like to ask a question, you're welcome to use the Q&A function at any time or use the raise your hand function. Feel free to ask questions throughout the webinar and we'll try and get to them all. Also, we're recording the session for Western Sydney Community Forum's YouTube channel. So if you missed any of today, you can go back and have a look at the YouTube clip afterwards. And now we'll play the Mayor's official welcome. Thanks.
G'day, Ross Fowler here. Just a few words on the Ageing Snapshot webinar. But before I start, I'd just like to acknowledge the unique status of the Aboriginal peoples as the original owners and custodians of the lands and waters, including the lands and waters of Penrith City. We know that Australia has an ageing population, but what does that mean for Penrith? In Penrith, older people are gradually making up a larger proportion of our residents, but not quite at the same rate as Australia as a whole. In addition to this shift in the age of our residents, our communities are becoming more culturally diverse. We know that older people make an extraordinary contribution to our economy and communities, and that our increasing diversity brings richness and resilience to our neighbourhoods. It includes valuable information about our changing population and older people's participation in the workforce, housing market and community. It also talks about how older people access services and any support they need. Particularly important at the moment is the section of the snapshot that outlines the risks of social isolation for some other older people. I'd like to thank council officers who developed the snapshot. Thashara Senaratna, Community Projects Officer, Older People, and Melissa McSeveny, Social Planning Coordinator. I'd also like to thank Anita Hanna and Western Sydney Community Forum for their support today, and the panel speakers, Ben Jackson from Greater Community Transport, Deet Kozak from Nepean Food Services, and Terry Leolis from Ethnic Communities Council of New South Wales. Penrith Council wants all our residents, young and old, to have access to the service they need, to be connected with one another, and to be able to contribute and live an engaged and active life. This snapshot is full of useful information to help community service providers, planners, policymakers, businesses, researchers and residents make that possible. And with COVID-19 changing the way we live, it is more important than ever that we work together to celebrate the diversity of older people and work with older people to learn about resilience. While many people in our community have been able to harness technology and stay connected to friends, family and services over the past months, some older people have struggled to navigate this new online world or have chosen not to connect online. We also know that in general, older people from Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander backgrounds and culturally diverse backgrounds can experience barriers in accessing the services they need. This snapshot provides information on the diversity and the broad trends for older residents in Penrith and what they want and need in terms of services and support, and how we can work together towards an age-friendly Penrith.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd also like to thank Western Sydney Community Forum, who are partnering with us for today's webinar and providing support. From Western Sydney Community Forum today, we have Anita Henner, who is the Manager of Policy and Programs. Anita, would you like to say a few words?
Thanks so much, Melissa. I'd like to start by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the many lands on which we're tuning in from today and beyond, and pay my respects to elders past, present, and future. I'm personally on the lands of the Cabral clan of the Darug Nation and pay my respects. And also with respect, I would like to acknowledge any Aboriginal friends and colleagues joining us today. Western Sydney Community Forum is pleased to partner with Penrith City Council in launching the city's snapshot of an ageing population. At Western Sydney Community Forum, we absolutely love data and data analysis, but what the snapshot does is it brings some of that data to life. It tells us a bit more about what our older people are doing, where they're living, whether they're working, volunteering, and tells us a little bit about their needs in relation to service delivery and all of that. The snapshot is a fantastic resource for anyone who's working not just with older people, but in the community more broadly. It does highlight the many challenges that we're facing in servicing older people. So it helps planners and policymakers around planning for the city's housing and infrastructure and public space. It also helps, I suppose, with more people aging in place. It helps community transport providers, and I know you'll hear from Ben in the panel. It helps those of us who provide services to older people in their homes, delivering home care packages and the Commonwealth Home Support Program. It also highlights many challenges for health workers and some of the things they need to think about. But what it does do as well is highlight some of the many strengths that come from having older people live in our communities, with that increasing diversity of older people, a significant number of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander older people and elders. We have a great deal of strengths that we can harness as a community. Some of those strengths can be seen in the data. So we've got a lot of older people contributing still to the economy. I was actually surprised at how many people over 65 continue to contribute via the labour force and workforce and continue to work. But also we've got older people volunteering, you know, keeping the heart in our communities, and through their efforts. We know that older people, and I know this, from having kids, they provide a great deal of billions of dollars to the economy through their care for our children and their grandchildren. So there's a whole heap of strengths. And I think probably the most important one is the wisdom. We have so much wisdom we've got years of wisdom in our communities across Western Sydney and also in Penrith specifically from all our older people. So I didn't have so much to say, just that we do love data and we love it when data comes to life. So Melissa, Tushara and the social planning team have done a fantastic job in developing this snapshot for all of us to use. And I'd like to thank Mayor Fowler and Penrith City Council. We're proud to partner with you, and I look forward to future and ongoing collaboration and partnership with you in the future. Thanks, Melissa.
Thanks, Anita. We are also proud to partner with Western Sydney Community Forum. It's been great. We partnered with you last week as well to launch the health snapshot, which went really well, and to launch this snapshot today as well. And hopefully it's just great to be accessing each other's data as well with the information and support that you provide for Western Sydney as a whole. I'll now go to the presentation to give everybody a quick overview of what can be found in the snapshot. So I will just share my screen. Here we go. So, as I mentioned, this is the second snapshot that Penrith Council is launching in response to our growing and changing population after publishing the community profile in 2018, which gave an overview of demographics and social issues in the LGA. It's Council's response to supporting our community partners and other levels of government to work with and for our changing communities. The snapshot we're launching today on the ageing population in Penrith has been an opportunity to explore the data on population trends and to support those in Penrith working with older people now or looking at responding to the ageing population into the future. This presentation is just a quick overview of what you can expect in the snapshot, which is now available on Council's website. And it's on the same page as the health snapshot and the community profile that I've just mentioned. So why and how? There've been significant changes in who makes up the older population in Penrith since 2006, which is the second last census that we had. We know that diversity is increasing in cultural backgrounds and languages spoken by older people, in what needs and interests older people have across the LGA, but also what older people bring to the communities and the challenges they face are changing. We wanted to gather a range of data around the ageing population in Penrith in an accessible format to begin to tell the story of what changes are taking place. And I'd like to acknowledge Westeer for their support with some of the data we explore in this snapshot. Of course, data and major trends are one piece of the story, and we know we need to work with each local community to be able to respond to their needs and support their aspirations. The data in the snapshot can be used for engagement strategies, for service planning, advocacy, and to support funding applications for community projects. It also provides us with a baseline of data that we can refer back to as data changes over the years. You might think of other uses for the snapshot, and we'd love to hear what everybody's using it for. This is an overview of the contents of the snapshot. You can see it covers quite a bit, and over the next slides, I'll quickly highlight some of the key findings in the snapshot. So this is about the proportion of older people in Penrith that make up the total of the population. So in 2016, older people made up 12% of the total population in Penrith. This percentage is relatively low compared to New South Wales and Australia, and Penrith has traditionally had a younger population than the state and the country. But by 2036, we expect the proportion in Penrith to be about 15.5%, which is much closer to that state and national percentage, which were around 16%. So we're catching up to the state and the country, and our population of older people is growing more quickly than those populations. This fast growth can also be seen when we look at Penrith's increase in older people compared to the rest of Western Sydney. This slide looks at our increase in diversity amongst the older population. So it has increased significantly, as we can see. So the number of older people from Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander communities and culturally and linguistically diverse backgrounds have both more than doubled between 2006 and 2016 in terms of numbers. We think this is mostly because of people from those backgrounds aging into the category of older people rather than people moving into the area, but there would also be some of that migration affecting these numbers as well. When we looked across the LGA at where older people are living and the suburbs with the highest number of older residents and the suburbs with the highest proportion of residents, we found that interestingly, 43% of the total older population in the city are living where there's significant socioeconomic disadvantage. But that is because those areas tend to be the older established areas in Penrith. So it's likely that a lot of the older people living in those suburbs moved into those areas as those areas were being settled, and they were young adults starting families, and they've remained in those suburbs as they've aged. We looked at statistics around older people who need assistance with core activities. We know there's a lot of different ways you can gather stats on people with disability or people needing assistance. We looked at a few different statistics around that. In 2016, less than 20% of older people in Penrith required assistance for core activities, which is significantly lower than Greater Western Sydney, which is at around 28%. But when we look at older people living in the more disadvantaged suburbs of Penrith, there is a greater need for assistance with care. There's also a greater need for assistance and care for older people who spoke a language other than English at home. It could be that older people who have experienced disadvantage in their lives need a higher rate of care because of any ways that disadvantage has affected their health, but we really would need to examine those stats more and speak to the community about those issues to get that full story behind those statistics. Employment and volunteering. As Anita mentioned, older people make a significant contribution to community and economy. And in looking at the contributions older people make to the economy and community, we can see that in 2016, 13% of older people in Penrith were employed. And we can see here the top 6 industries employing older people in Penrith. We know a high proportion of volunteers in the city are older people also, because they're more likely to have time if they're retired or they don't have caring responsibilities. But also there are significant benefits for older people in volunteering in terms of a sense of satisfaction in making meaningful contributions to the community and in staying connected to others. We know from Council's 2018 consultation with older people that lots of older people would like more opportunities to volunteer, and Council's working towards supporting that with information on our website and the volunteering expo that we held last year, and supporting volunteer-based organisations with volunteers. Risk factors for social isolation. So the health status, the level of social and economic participation with employment and volunteering, and housing ownership among older people in the area is all positive when we're comparing Penrith to other regions. But there is still a likelihood in Penrith for older people to be at risk of experiencing disadvantage and social isolation. So keeping in mind that these are just indicators, it's not that people without an internet connection are socially isolated. It's just an indication that they could be at risk of social isolation. In Penrith, 25% of older people have no internet connection. And we know that an internet connection or support from someone with internet connection is quite important to accessing information and services like My Aged Care and MyGov. And we explore those issues in the snapshot as well, especially other cohorts within the older population who are less likely to have internet connection. Another indicator of risk for social isolation is limited English proficiency. People with limited English can have difficulty accessing mainstream services, especially if there's a lack of translated material. And they can also experience communication barriers in accessing work opportunities and social networks. Living alone is the third indicator that we've listed related to social isolation. And in 2016 in Penrith, there were roughly 4,600 people aged 65 and over who were living alone. So that's roughly a fifth of people in that age group in Penrith, which is a slightly higher percentage than Western Sydney. Social isolation is obviously an important issue to be looking at, particularly at the moment with the COVID-19 pandemic also. And we can touch on these issues with the panel in a moment. This is where people can access the snapshot. You can see Penrith City Council's website, resources and documents. We have the health snapshot, which we launched last week, and then the snapshot of the ageing population in Penrith. Finally, I'd like to thank everyone at council who's contributed to the research and development of the snapshot, including Tashara Senaratna, our project officer, older people, and also Jenny Pollard, the manager, City Activation Community in Place, for her support and leadership. We really hope that this snapshot can be used to support organisations and those in the community to work with older people in building on the strengths and resilience that is already there in our older population and responding to their needs. We'll now move on to the panel discussion, and I'll just remind everybody that you can use the Q&A function at any time to be asking questions, and I can see there's already a couple of questions. We can send the PDF of the PowerPoint slideshow around, and we'll put the link to the snapshot out to everybody at the end of the webinar and also in an email. So I'll now introduce the panel members. We have Ben Jackson, who is CEO of Great Community Transport. Welcome, Ben. Dita Kozak, General Manager, Nepean Food Services. Hi, Dita. Oh, you're still on mute. There we go. Off now. Good morning. Hi. And Terry Leolius, who's the National Manager, Speak My Language at the Ethnic Communities Council of New South Wales. Hi, Terry.
Good morning. Hello.
Hi. So we've had a quick run through of some of the stats that are in the snapshot, and you've all had a little bit of a preview of the snapshot before this as well. I might go around to each of you and ask what you see as the emerging issues in Penrith for older people at the moment. Ben, what sort of emerging issues are you seeing at the moment for older people?
So, I mean, more broad, well, first of all, let me acknowledge all of our Indigenous peoples and obviously their custodianship of all of the lands that we are on today. I'm sure there's many of them. Specifically, I'd also like to recognise any Indigenous people that are in the community services for their work in that. For me, from a community transport perspective, the real challenge is access. So how do we provide opportunities for our older generation to get to the places that they want to get to do the things that they want to do so that they are properly engaged in our community. So whilst there are a lot of opportunities for us to engage at either end of the transport function, you know, the getting there is also very important for them.
Great, thanks. Dita, how about you in your work? What are you seeing as the emerging issues for older people?
Just so that everyone knows that we provide Meals on Wheels and social support. So Nepean Food Services is Meals on Wheels. I asked my team, and I've written some things down, so if I go too long, just let me know. But we've found the emerging issues is really big at the moment is social isolation as we move into a digitally connected but less personal world. Being left behind with technology, even watching TV these days is getting complicated for older people. Feeling secure at home as people age in place. Maybe a helpline for old people that can be open 24/7 might be a good idea. For people in nursing homes, fear of infectious diseases running rampant within the facility and being cut off from their families during the illness. We talked about for carer families, it would be helpful to develop a command centre app. So, you know, like Uber, that you see what's happening, who's delivering the meals, the welfare checks that are needed, and that you know that's happening if you're working. Something really important is the number of aged care packages needs to be increased to reflect the growth of the ageing population. For Meals on Wheels in particular, malnutrition in aged people needs to be addressed, because 34% of older people are at risk of malnutrition. And our city will need an all hands on deck to be able to successfully grow into a major city. All workers need to be enabled to help their older relatives while being supported to remain in the workforce themselves. Sorry that was written, but I didn't want to forget anything. So an aged community and disability care needs to be supported to come to the fore and be acknowledged as a valuable resource and major employer of people with passion to serve our growing aged population. That was from my team.
Thanks, Steve. That's interesting. That's a long list, but it's you know, it's really clear that there's a lot of issues that that we can work towards responding to. Terry, what are you seeing as emerging issues for older people at the moment?
There's so much there, and congratulations on the report as well. Such a great collaboration. And I think the first thing that comes to our mind is great collaboration with everyone to build Penrith to where it needs to be and where it needs to go. And that means collaborating with services, but also ethnic associations, multicultural groups, Indigenous groups as well, so they feel that they're taking ownership of the community in which he's growing and how that's going to be looking like in the future. There's so much here. I don't know what to, as yourself, Dee, having that long list there, but I think being connected is really important for our culturally diverse communities, feeling connected, not just within family and their community or their associations, but connected with their broader community, connected with the spaces that they have around them. I know for many of our communities, they say ownership of my city, having a place that is friendly for seniors, that is open for seniors, and they feel that they own that space. And they often say that the space is there for young people, where are the spaces for the older people? So be able to create those and co-design with them. I think co-design is really important as well. Multicultural spaces, and quite often we build cities and then think of that as an afterthought. So perhaps a nice multicultural hub or multicultural spaces, which you don't have to so much create those multicultural spaces, but you're there that you walk into them. That it's part of the city infrastructure rather than something you have to go out and seek to find. And I think one of the other things I'm looking at, and we'll probably talk a little bit more about it as well, is what we call ikigai, that the Okinawans talk about, or purpose. And many of our seniors have so much to offer, but they need to be given an opportunity for purpose. So being able to build a city around that purpose as well, giving them opportunity to be part of that growth, being part of that, building their community. I think that they're very good at that, and they would feel that they would have more ownership of that as well. And of course, services that are accessible, languages that are accessible, translated materials, but maybe thinking outside the square rather than translated materials on a pamphlet or a flyer. How else can we make surveys, community consultations in their own language through audio surveys and so on, would actually participate a lot in the growth of the city and how it's designed. That's just a few of the things.
Great, thanks, Terry. And we definitely talk in the snapshot about having an age-friendly city, and obviously part of that is looking at the diversity within the aged population as well.
Yeah, definitely.
So the snapshot contains quite a bit of data that we're hoping will support people in delivering services, data around a range of issues that affect older people and an aging population. I might go around just in a different order. I'll start with you, Terry, again. If you can talk about how you use data in your work and any practical advice around how services in the city can be using data as well to support their services and work.
Absolutely. There's such a gap when it comes to collection of data and having access to data, particularly when it reflects around CALD issues or CALD populations. It's quite often an afterthought, or it's quite often not collected. So to see your report actually capture that data is exciting, because then people can build and utilize that data around their applications, around their consultations, where to target your peak points and which communities to target as well. I think it's a good example for many cities to, when they're doing their data crunching, how they can actually utilize these reports to actually do a lot of their planning as well with their communities as well. I think also as a community, knowing that your council and your city is capturing you in that definition of what they call community means that they're included in that definition, and it means they go for the ride with you as well. And I think a lot of people who may in the past have received reports and don't appear in those or be not acknowledged in those reports means that they're invisible, they're not part of that team or part of that community. So that alone, I think, has been an excellent result from the report. For ourselves, data is essential, and I think many services will be looking at particularly breaking down the bigger data, the community groups, the languages, the ages, and being able to have them involved, as I said, in a lot of the planning that comes up.
Thanks. Dita or Ben, whoever wants to jump in, did you have anything to add to that around using data to plan services in the community, or how you might suggest services in Penrith can use this data or other data in their work?
Well, I just wanted to congratulate Council as well for the snapshot. I read it, it was really interesting. And it shows us we can look at the data and plan for our future developments, because it shows you where people are aging, where, you know, and all the numbers about the called clients and the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander clients. That was really interesting. And we already know as a service that we, you know, that malnutrition and nutrition is really important. And we've already grown our service during this pandemic time, you know, by about, I think we've got an extra 200 clients already. So just to get all that information as well, I think that will let us, will lead us in the right direction of where we should be promoting our service in the future.
Right.
Yeah, for us, data, it allows us to drill down on the different parts of our community. So, you know, for instance, knowing that there is going to be a excuse me, it's not the corona, promise. For us, knowing where the aging population is in Penrith allows us to schedule transport around those particular areas, so we have an understanding of, you know, where our demand is going to be. Makes it easier for us to determine things like very practical things like, you know, where do we put our depot? You know, it allows us to understand what type of support services we need to put in place around, you know, language and culture once people are on the bus. So, you know, for us to understand the data that you guys have produced, and, you know, pretty awesome report, then, you know, it allows us to look to the future in terms of the way that we can provide the service. And, you know, without, it creates an efficiency, I suppose, in us looking forward and understanding how to deliver.
Great, thanks. We're getting a few questions from the participants in the webinar. The first one from Melisha is around how do you reach and communicate with those living in isolation, or even identify who might be isolated? And Ben and Dita, you both work with people who are at risk of social isolation. And I know, Terry, you know a lot about this as well. Does anyone want to talk about how you've approached that with your services?
Yeah, we've got a Speak One Language program that we utilised, and we deliver information in language through conversations, through podcasts on ethnic radio and online. And what we found was by broadcasting on ethnic radio, we were reaching those people at home that would normally not be linked into regular services or regular programs and so on. So that was a really great mechanism and a really great tool to utilise. So I would probably say reaching out to your multimedia forums, to your newspapers, to your ethnic radio stations, and share this great data. Share this report with them. Let them know that they've been counted and they're part of that report as well. I think that's a great medium. We've used that in language through a conversational piece, and it's been a really, really powerful way.
Great.
For us, and I suspect that it would be similar for Dita as well. A lot of social isolation is recognised by our frontline. So those people who are, you know, driving people to and from, the bus attendants who are caring for the people whilst they're on the bus, getting on and off the bus. Those are the people that are engaging our clients on a regular basis, and they will understand what social isolation risks exist with that client. Like Terry says, it's about having a conversation with people and understanding where they're at. Without that engagement, without that, the capacity to care for the client, you don't find these things out.
I think COVID-19 as well provided an opportunity for your local cafes, your local places where people would go. They became sort of very community oriented and community aware. I haven't seen such and such for a little while. I wonder how she's going. It's that neighbour down the road that it's not only services, although they do a brilliant job and they're a fabulous source. I think it would be a great opportunity to look at the other sources, make the community more aware of itself. We've lost that village mentality where everyone looks after each other, and it'd be really nice to be able to see if we could capture some of that.
I'm not sure if we cover this later in the questions, but as part of the New South Wales government COVID response, a lot of what we had to do just disappeared. People, weren't willing to get on buses. They were told to stay at home. And for us, what was our alternative to understand what the impact of that was? So many of the drivers and the office staff whose workload reduced substantially, we just redeployed them into a client welfare team who rang those people and said, "How are you doing?" So it was tantamount of getting on a bus, but it was done over the phone. So as Terry says, it's about creating the village that cares for each and every part of our community and understands how to engage them if they look like they're going to get left behind.
Yeah, I agree with Ben. We did the same because all our social support stopped, and we weren't picking people up to go to our restaurants and different social activities that we did. So the girls that were providing that service, we put them on wellbeing checks over the phone as well. We knew, as running a service the same as Ben, which clients are isolated and who have no one that they can call on. So we definitely made sure that they were a lot. What my worry is the people that are at home that aren't with our services that are isolated. That's my worry, and how to, engage with them.
Yeah, we've actually got another question here. Marilyn has asked if there's any data on the number of people not accessing services. So obviously with your services at the moment, you've been able to, hate to use the word pivot, during COVID-19 and be checking in on people in different ways, and you've identified the people that might be isolated. But I guess the question is always, what about the people who are out there who aren't accessing services? And I might just share my screen quickly because there was a slide that got missed somehow in the presentation around aged care services and how many people are accessing those in Penrith. So I'll just quickly share my screen again to show that slide. So we can see here that the rates of aged care service usage in the Nepean are lower compared to the rest of New South Wales. The pattern across the different services being used is the same, but and also we know that the health of older people in Penrith and the need for assistance is lower, and that may explain why less people are using services. But it also could be representative of people not knowing about what services are out there. And in our 2018 consultation with older people, we did identify that a lot of older people weren't aware of the services that were available to them, which is a barrier in accessing them, obviously. So we have data on who is accessing services, and therefore the number of people who aren't accessing services, but we don't have, I guess, that information around why they're not accessing services. Is it because they don't need them, or because they don't know they're there, or some other barrier there? I'll just stop sharing my screen again now. Would any of you have anything to add around that, around people not accessing services and what you've experienced there? Do you think that information about services is getting to the people who need it?
I think, oops, you go for it.
Sorry, Terry. Just before COVID, like our service promotes heavily. So we go out and do promotions in the community. I think last year we held a number of called promotions with the Greek community, the Maltese community, and we had to have translators there, but it all went really well. And also we held with council a function that was inviting a whole lot of different called communities as well. So, and everything was translated. But because of COVID, we can't do that anymore. So, and like I said, that's my biggest worry, that we're not, like we can put ads in the paper and all that sort of stuff so that they know that what our services can do. But are we missing people? That's you know, the big worry.
Mm.
Yeah. I think having an aging population and eventually we're going to get to a point that there aren't going to be enough services to cater for the number of people that really need them. And there are a lot of people out there that are currently receiving support, but not officially through official channels, official services as well. And you find places like Penrith and council in your area would probably have a lot more support through community. That are actually probably supporting these older people rather than going through official services if they aren't able, or they're not aware, or if they're not accessing them. So that would be another interesting point, to see how many people are receiving support, but maybe not official funded service support, because that support is still there, which is a strength of Penrith and a strength of your community as well.
Yeah, definitely. We do find that even in some of our areas with high rates of disadvantage, that there's a lot of that informal support, or informal insurance, even we'd call it, because it's places where people can go, or people they can depend on in times of need.
And that's a strong community. That's a resilient community, one that can actually be able to do that for itself, and the community comes on board and finds its own solutions.
Yeah,
it's fantastic.
Whilst I support the organic development of support, the reality of it is that government bodies in their various forms have all of this data. If someone cancels their driver's license and can no longer drive, or the RMS, or whatever they are now, have cancelled someone's driver's license, they have that data. So they should be able to inform the local community transport organisation, this person no longer has a driver's licence. Would you like to provide a service to them? Now, there's all sorts of data that exists within different formats that, if we had access to it, or if government accessed it on our behalves, which is more likely, then surely we would be able to provide more information, more relevant information to those people who may require service, rather than having people fall through the cracks, which can happen in an organic situation.
Mm-hmm. I think you find too, with a lot of departments in government, they're all collecting data, but they don't communicate with each other. So you're not able to make that correlation. So therefore that connection doesn't get made. And I think this is a great opportunity for Penrith to be able to share that data and make those local connections with your local services, and be able to create those solutions and identify gaps and priority areas, which is harder to do at that higher level. But I do agree with you. Sharing of that data and making those connections rather than shelving it is a way of helping us on the ground, definitely.
And the fact that we're sitting here right now talking about data that Penrith Council's worked so hard to deliver to us is an amazing boon for us, and we just need to make sure that it doesn't it gets used properly and effectively. All of the services that are sitting around us. this table.
Yeah.
And I should add as well that, you know, the role of the social planning team at council is to support the community and community service orgs with information or data as needed. I can't say I've looked at RMS data or tried to get that. I'm not sure if you have in the past, Ben, but we'd be happy to look into that. I'd never thought of that as, you know, not working in community transport. I'd never thought of that particular data set as being useful, but yeah, if that data is available, it's something that we could work towards getting.
Yep.
Definitely. So we've got some other questions here around which are the best local community orgs to connect with to promote a strength and balance due to launch in Penrith in September. I'm not sure if that's in reference to a specific program that might be starting, but I know that the Department of Health, for example, runs a lot of strength and balance and called the Stepping On program, which is delivered through a number of locations in Sydney. And I'm sure that if you Googled Stepping On, people would be able to find information about that and refer people to it. Does anyone else know of any other strength and balance type programs for older people?
So we partner with health in regards to Stepping On. So we run 2 a year with, and we promote it heavily within our client base. But I haven't heard of any other program in that regard.
And I would probably say there are many services that are doing that, but tap into your churches, your mosques, your religious leaders, your CALD associations. They're often tucked away there in the background, your Indigenous groups, and encourage them for participation, because quite often they might not get that promotion or marketing.
Mm-hmm. Okay, great. Thanks. We've identified a lot of issues for older people and for an aging population. We've talked about the difficulty of getting around, social isolation, being left behind with technology, malnutrition. Are there any initiatives or local project models that you'd like to see expanded or replicated in Penrith that are addressing these kind of issues successfully already? Ben? Yep, sorry, Dita.
I think that LEAP is running courses to improve computer knowledge for aged clients. And I think that we're going to run one as well later on, as soon as we can get everyone together within our community restaurants. So that's something that can be looked at.
I think that program, is that the Tech Mates that you're referring to? Yeah,
They want to come in and expand that, I think, within our client base as well. So
yeah, and
it's a really important initiative to get everyone up and running with computers. Like my baby boomers will be able to use computers, but there's still people that are older than the baby boomers that need the help.
Yeah, that's right. The over 65 population, it covers a broad range of ages and abilities and life stages. Obviously, there's some diversity there. And in terms of technological support and digital literacy, I know Penrith Library runs some programs as well. If anyone's interested in referring people to those, they can speak to Penrith Library.
Yeah. There's an increase in tech-savvy program. Oh, sorry, Ben, go ahead.
For great community transport, and I think more generally within the community sector, we need to have some space to expand the offering with which we are best known for. So for great community transport, for us, we want to be able to provide some caring and support function outside of just driving people from A to B. Shortly, we're going to be offering a gardening service, and in conjunction with that, replicating a program in the UK called Care and Repair, which is an opportunity for clients to spend some time having a cup of tea and have some functional aspect done around their house. One of the gardening stuff that we have at the moment likes to tell the story about one of his old clients at a different organisation who had applied to have her gardening done every fortnight, and her gardening consisted of 4 pot plants on her balcony, and it was really just about that particular gardener turning up, having a cup of tea, and moving the pot plants around. But for her, that was a really important social engagement for her every fortnight. It was part of how she kept in contact with the world. So I think as community organisations, we need to be, a little more patient, maybe a little more expansive, and a little more generous about the time that we provide people, rather than just providing them a service for a fee and leaving when that's done.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely.
So,
yeah, even some going back to engaging with your community, even creating spaces that are accessible and usable to all. So, for example, in the Illawarra, there was a beautiful park where they created a oven that the community could use, and there were festivals that were actually held around this oven. A bread making festival, for example, where all the communities came together and each one set up a tent and created their own breads of their own traditions, used the oven to cook the breads. They were all quite different, and yet they shared that similarity, and that brought them together. In the end, they had to fight over who was going to have the bread oven on the weekends. So there was this park that was never used, and then suddenly there was a demand for its use, and festivals and events were based around it. So there's lots of opportunities to create those spaces, I think, and bringing our seniors out from their homes and into the community.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's really important.
Yeah. There's definitely a couple of those programs around Village Cafe, for example, we talked about last week in the Health Snapshot, but it's about bringing the services and information to the people rather than expecting them to come along. There's just been a few suggestions from people in the audience and some information and advice. So Eric Wright from Community College has also talked about the Tech Savvy Seniors program for seniors interested in digital literacy. And people are talking about exercise equipment in local parks, which Penrith definitely has, as well as play equipment for younger people. And I know in Council's Sport and Rec strategy, we're working towards having play equipment for all ages in local parks into the future as well. Yola has suggested that there's U3A courses as well in terms of lifelong learning and lots of different things for older people. So we've talked about services addressing the needs and emerging issues for older people. Has anyone got any good examples or experience of projects where you're basing it on the strengths and resilience of older people that's there already and building on that? And I'm wondering if any of the projects that you've worked on have had that strengths-based approach. We talked earlier about the resilience of older people, which is evident during COVID-19 as well. People are looking to older people for their wisdom and resilience. And we talked about the strengths and the contributions that older people make to the community and the economy. Did anyone want to speak to that strengths-based approach in working with older people?
Yeah.
Part of the challenge for older people is that, as the data suggests, there's actually quite a lot of volunteers amongst that group. And part of the strength that went missing during the COVID period was that a lot of these older people were told to stay home. And whilst we were able to engage some of them remotely, not all of them were able to. But it became really apparent at that point in time the strength and the experience that we referred to those volunteers internally, and if that's reflective in our community more generally, then asking those people to stay home becomes even more challenging around creating that or getting the benefits from that strength and resilience of the older people.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I totally agree with Ben. We had to ask the 50 of our volunteers to stand down because they were over age 17. They're just chomping at the bit to come back. So their strength is evident. In regards to clients, I think, you know, we hand out different things to them and they report back to us. We have all these phone calls going around and people that are emailing and, you know, they're staying strong, but it's a matter of just engaging with them all the time. So when we can get back together, then you see their strengths and their resilience, really. It's just a bit hard at the moment.
I must say my hat goes off to many of the cloud services and CHSP providers that I've been working with. They have just shown such incredible resilience and flexibility to be able to maneuver around COVID-19, and it's changed the landscape. And I think whether we go back completely to what we ever had, I don't think that will ever happen. The landscape's changed forever. And I think the way in which we engage with our volunteers, and they are very eager to engage, and they're sitting at home going, give me something to do, you know. And I think it's around redesigning how we see our volunteers and what, you know, Ben, as you said, utilising them in a different capacity, and they're quite flexible to be able to do that. We had a beautiful ladies group, a Spanish-speaking group in the Illawarra, who the ladies ended up sewing all these beautiful little animal cardigans for the animals that were burnt during the bushfires down in the Illawarra South Coast, which is something they had never done before. So there's lots of little initiatives, and I think the idea is that if you take it to them and say, what would you like to do? Have that conversation and extract that. They will come up with some brilliant ideas themselves around where they see themselves being repositioned, because COVID-19 has given them a chance to see themselves in a different light as well, and what they have to offer.
Interesting. Yeah. Wow. So we've only got 2 minutes left. There's still a few questions that we haven't answered, but I think if people wanted to get in contact with any of the panel members today, or with Council, Tashara Senaratna at Penrith City Council, and we can we'll send out an email after this with contact details and a link to the snapshot. But I just wanted to thank the panel members again for your time today. And I'd like to thank all the participants who've come along to listen in today and ask questions. You can access the snapshot on Council's website, and we will put up a link that people can click on to access the snapshot, and also to provide feedback on today's webinar. And a reminder that the webinar will be up on Western Sydney Community Forum's YouTube channel after this. So thank you, everyone, for your time today.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Melissa, and thanks to the forum.
Thank you. Yes, absolutely. Congratulations. Well done.
Thank you very much, guys. See you later.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you. Take care. Look after yourselves.